Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show, by any host, or by any guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before you begin any new diet, exercise, or training program. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network. On Healing Ties, we're creating a life to love after caregiving ends by sharing stories and resources and being with awesome people like you. Now that caregiving has ended, let the Healing Ties begin. Here's your host, Chris McClellan, the Bowtie Guy.
Well, greetings everyone. It is Chris McClellan, the Bowtie Guy, for another episode of Healing Ties. Thanks for joining me today. If you are a first-time listener to the Whole Care Network, welcome. What we're trying to do here at the Whole Care Network is create a level of stories that really touch the heart. We believe at the Whole Care Network that it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to combat a common cause. And if you're familiar with my Healing Ties show, I appreciate the feedback. Certainly want to send out a hello and a welcome to all our listeners in the UK on ukhealthradio.com. We appreciate your support for our show. And just one quick plug about the network. Our 6-series podcast just started. Let me take that back. Our 5th 6-series podcast. That's kind of a tongue twister when you think about it. With Barbara McAfee, Songs for the Caregiver's Soul, that debuted last Tuesday. That would be the 12th of June, and that's running through the middle of July. And you can just hop on to thewholecarenetwork.com and do a search on Songs for the Caregiver's Soul, and you'll hear some terrific songs coming from Barbara McAfee. And I have a feeling today, after I start talking to my special guest, that she's going to want to listen to those songs as well. But woohoo! So let me give you a little introduction about my special guest. Before I go to the formal introduction, I just want to say to all my listeners, one of the distinct pleasures I have of doing these shows is I get to meet people all throughout the country who, in most cases, I never would have had the chance to meet. But they all have awesome stories, and they all change people's lives. And today, Meridith, I'm just going to forego the formal introduction and welcome you to the show. We'll get through the introduction. We'll do the formal introduction as we go through it.
Sounds perfect.
I'm welcoming Meridith Alexander to the show. Welcome.
Why, thank you, Chris. I am so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your incredible program.
Well, thank you. And, we've been chatting for a few months now, and today is the day we're actually doing the podcast. But I also think we're going to be doing a few other things down the road. But before we get into that, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about you and your story with your daughter, Sky?
Sure. So I have been an entrepreneur for most of my life, kind of, nothing super remarkable moving through my life with, a fair share of ups and downs, and life was looking like it was just really going on the up and up. My youngest daughter out of 3 had graduated from Yale and was down in South America on a Yale fellowship, and decided to go to a little trip in Colombia, South America. So on February 19th, 2016, my daughter was with a group of tourists just finishing up a whitewater rafting and frolicking actually in a little swimming pond, and everyone was jumping off this ledge, and everyone got ready to leave, and the guide started climbing up on the ledge to take a photograph. And the next thing they knew, the guide was screaming that a boulder was falling. So the entire group began to scatter, and everyone leapt back onto the rafts, and everyone made it to safety. except for one. And that, of course, was my daughter, Schuyler. So on that fateful Friday afternoon, my phone rang and I picked it up and I heard a voice on the other side of the line saying, is this Schuyler's mom? And of course, in that instant, I knew. I knew. So Schuyler had been crushed by a boulder. It was a direct hit. She was not expected to live. She was in a hospital in Socorro, South America. 4 surgeons were fighting desperately to try to keep her alive long enough for me to get down there to say my final goodbyes.
Wow.
Yes. So, so as you can imagine, I mean, the first hours were kind of like a perfect storm of every horrible negative emotion and angst and despair and grief and blame of myself. Could I have done something differently? Could I have asked her not to go? Could I have somehow influenced her to be less daring than she was? And magnificently enough, as things tend to happen in life, I was on the plane with my other daughter at 30,000 feet. And I came back to the only place where I knew to come, and that was within myself, and say, I must find something to give my daughter. I can't let her go down this road by herself. What do I have? And in moments as powerful as that, at least for me, one of the hardest things for me to actually see was my own greatness and any power that I had. But I knew that I had absolutely no impact on this outer game. So the only place that I had a prayer of impacting was this mindset, this inner game.
Having a positive mindset in the middle of a tragedy, it takes strength. And you're certainly somebody that's demonstrated that.
Well, fortunately for me, I have always been an avid student and proponent of the power of a deliberately positive mindset. And to me, that's not the same as looking on the bright side, because looking on the bright side implies the existence of a dark side.
Oh, very good.
Right? Mm-hmm. So in order to really be positively focused and truly launching from a place of ultimate power, that is from the very powerful position of hope that you and I have talked about. I mean, it's an expectation of success, and it's the belief that just because you don't see a level of success now, it's inevitable and genuinely inevitable. And that's not, again, an airy-fairy, the rose-colored glasses. This is so calm and so sure that even the belief that you have to fight doesn't exist. Because if something is inevitable, why on earth would you have to fight to get it?
Oh my goodness.
Right?
That is so true.
Right.
You don't have to fight. It comes in its own time, and it comes naturally because it's supposed to happen.
Right. And so and the trick for me was genuinely getting my mind to buy into it. I know that there's a lot of banter about the power of affirmations and just state it and ultimately you'll bring it to pass, which can be accurate if you have the expectation that an affirmation is automatically going to bring it to pass. However, for many of us, our brains, our minds, our subconscious hear us saying blah, 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 affirmation, and they go, yeah, right. That is so far from the truth.
Right.
And so when we're making this affirmation, let's say it's about money, that I am a money magnet, what we're really delivering is I am stating that I'm a money magnet because nothing else is working. And I am trying every single thing because I'm so freaking focused on the lack of the money that I desire. So we're not focusing on that. So for me, I had to get my beliefs genuinely in the place where I truly believed that everything would be fine, whatever that new fine would mean. And that also meant that I had to go down the path that if Schuyler did not survive, as they predicted that she would not, that too would be fine. And I say that having asked myself the powerful question of, I have been entrusted to be her mother. So what does that mean as far as her legacy? Because even though we would like to think as parents that we are going to outlive our children, sometimes we don't have that luxury. And yet what can never be taken from us is the legacy that they have created in whatever short period of time they have lived their own lives, but they have impacted everyone around them. So I had to make a choice. Was I going to make her life about her legacy that I would then carry on and expand upon? Or would I make her life simply mean that she had lived so that I could complete the rest of my life saying that I was the mother of a child who was killed at an early age by a boulder? Was that the total summation? And of course, to me, the answer was obvious. In order to be the type of mother that I wanted to be to her and that she had lived so fully to deserve, I had to find the place where whatever happened was the highest and best and fine. So inch by inch, I took one thought at a time that my mind could accept and could believe. And I could believe that I looked back on some of actually the really difficult things that had impacted me in my life, some things that had brought tremendous sorrow or shame or tears or heartache. And at the time, I didn't understand why I had gone through them, and it was almost impossible to feel gratitude for them. But they became my rocket fuel in this moment of saying, thank God I went through them. If I had known that they were serving a purpose, I wouldn't have felt the exact emotion that gave me this strength, that gave me this edge, that gave me this resilience and determination that would allow me to be the perfect mother right now that my daughter needs. So because this seems now so perfectly orchestrated, how logical then that everything else is orchestrated to work out perfectly. So how perfectly logical that I should trust the process even when I can't see it and don't understand it. So how logical then to believe that everything truly is going to be fine. There's nothing that can go wrong. There's nothing that I can mess up. There's nothing that I can do or not do. And there's no way that life will not conform to our vision because everything has flowed so perfectly up to now. So the irony is that my mind was in this perfectly beautiful place as my daughter was fighting for her life in an ICU room. And yet I could feel that life had us covered.
Well, I'm somewhat speechless because because I've struggled myself personally in letting go per se and trying to control outcomes that I have no control over, especially in my caregiving experience. I didn't realize until the last 2 days of Richard's life that, he was going to die. I didn't have the mindset that would allow me to be that comfortable in such what's the word I'm looking for? Difficult is not the right word. So in a situation that you were so used to things just going to be okay,
right?
And all of a sudden you realize that they weren't.
Well, and that So that was part of it for me, was to really have a heart to heart with my ultimate soulmate, meaning the me within myself, who no one can be a better mate to our souls than our own souls. So we are our perfect soulmate. Yes. So that's where I had to have a conversation, and a loving conversation with myself, saying this belief that Sky, my daughter, must be present physically in order for me to feel her, experience her, have experienced her, in order for me to be whole, is an illusion that I'm choosing to define myself with. What if our relationship is such a beautiful web that we are meant to be something that is superimposed upon each other, and it's her brilliant 22 years that are intended to ignite in me a fusion of our two purposes. And thanks to the 22 years of physical life on this planet, she is able to be the catalyst for this incredible vision that now becomes Meridith and Schuyler united, not necessarily in two physical beings, but in definitely a powerful essence, right? So I had to get past the point where I emotionally, mentally, and spiritually believed that if she did not make it physically, that quote unquote everything was not going to be all right, that was not all right, because it wasn't up to me to judge. Up to me was to try to harmonize with whatever, I call it God universe, because to me it encompasses not only a profoundly holy being, but also our own deep selves, some essence of ourselves that sometimes we don't even see we don't always recognize is there.
We recognize it, yeah.
Yes.
We talked a little bit about this before we turned on the record button, but I'm going to bring it up again because it was so powerful offline that I'd like to have this conversation again online. And it really follows up for what you were just saying, and it's a quote that's on your website. Suddenly, the Boulder became a profound lesson in how to live.
Yes.
I'm not sure we can verbatim repeat our conversation, but I'm pretty sure we can get close to it, because that really that's such a powerful statement.
Yes, and it has become a capsule of everything that this journey, and I think I shared with you that first of all, for your listeners, Schuyler miraculously did survive, and it began to look truly as if life was conforming to my vision when we were able to airlift her. The miracle started right off the bat. But when we were able to airlift her to Miami, and we arrived, and the first morning when the neuro team came to talk to me, they leveled with me that if it was not the most difficult case they'd ever seen, it was certainly in the top 3. And they told me later that actually Hippocrates, who's the father of modern medicine, he makes a statement that holds true today, and that is, if you can see the patient's brain, they do not survive. And most certainly, you could see Schuyler's brain. Wow. So there was no expectation that they would be able to pull this off. And yet there I was, a friend's rendition, and I vaguely remember doing this and saying this, but when they walked into the room and they were preparing me for virtually the impossibility, and they were looking at us with such pity, basically, because I was there as calm and positive by this point as I am with you. And I stopped them and I said, I appreciate what you're saying, but my daughter is going to be fine. And you're the best surgeons in the world. This is one of the best facilities in the world. All we have to do is figure out how to get her there. So you can see that fall, you could see the angst, the tension, their own issues kind of falling off, and miracles began to happen. So ultimately, what I say to you and what to me encapsulates this whole journey and why they started calling us the miracle family from after departing from a point of looking at us with such pity, and was that when this first occurred, it really looked like this horrible boulder was going to be an awful lesson in how to face the tragedy of death. What evolved was that this boulder came as a powerful lesson in how to choose to live. So it impacted profoundly not just our own family's life, but it brought with it the gift of us being able to profoundly share the gift of this boulder with thousands. And the funny thing about this is, to me, I'm a big word person, and as I even later I looked as I was dipping my toe in whether to really I wanted to actually get up on stages and talk about this. I went to a session about how to train the trainer, and it was the first time I had left Schuyler. This was months down the road, the first time I had left Schuyler ever since this event, and I was going to be there for a couple of days and really trying to figure out if I would have the courage to get up on stage and do this, actually. And I sat in the audience, and the trainer, I kid you not, Chris, said, if you're content with making a small change in the world, then just toss a few stones across the water. But if you want to make a tsunami of change, embrace your boulder. And my hair still stands on it.
Oh my goodness.
Was like, yeah, it was totally like a validation. It was just like
powerful.
Bring it on. So as I was musing on my way home about this and thinking about embracing the boulder and the lessons and things that I'd been able to kind of share even at this seminar with people, was that even in the word itself, if you take the you out of the word boulder, in other words, when you are finally willing to get out of your own way, what's left is a bolder, more empowered version of not only your own life, but what you have to give to the planet as a whole.
Very powerful, Meridith. Goodness. So let's come full circle.
Yes.
Tell us about your life and Schuyler's life now, the things that you're doing.
It's amazing, actually. Another one of the gifts that we've been given is the ability to really, both she and I really live in the moment. We're very, very invested in that. So we still we laugh constantly. We giggle. I act so goofy that I would be horrified if anybody in the listening audience could actually see me perform that way. Not really, but yes. Goofy. I mean, we have a blast. And yet, Sky is having to relearn everything. She has of something that actually was supposed to, a lesion in her brain that people typically do not survive from, and if they do, they're vegetative. Well, she most definitely is not vegetative, but it has impacted her balance. So she's still 100% dependent on me, with the assistance of one other woman who comes in to help me when God forbid, I need to work or something like that. So she's learning how to stand with a Walker, absolutely, you cannot leave her side. And this is a young woman who traveled around the world and climbed mountains and rappelled down waterfalls. And she's had to relearn how to swallow, how to eat food, how to speak, how to everything. So we're only about 2.5 years into this journey. And typically when someone has a traumatic brain injury, everyone is different. But when they're intense like this, it's at least 7 to 8 years before you have a prayer at any level of independence. However, all that said, she continues to go out there and work to try to make the airlines a little more friendly to wheelchair. She was in the Miss Wheelchair pageant. As you know, Chris, when I thought I was just going to be updating friends and family, had to create a page called The Sky is the Limit, but spelled like her name, SCHUY, on Facebook. And all of a sudden, we had thousands of people, many of people who didn't even know us. So last fall, I happened to run into someone who stopped me and said that they were following our story, and their book club wanted to know when I was going to put the post in the book. And I kind of said, well, why would you want them in a book? They're on Facebook. But mind you, they're 2.5 years buried back. Yeah. So one thing led to another, and before I knew it, literally a few weeks later, I had a few extra chapters and I had everything put together. I had designed a cover for it, and poof, it went out on Amazon. And that night, it hit the bestseller in the motivational category. So all of a sudden, I had that, and then Prevention Magazine covered our story. And so now we've been covered by the major networks, and I wrote an article this month for Tampa Bay Wellness. I've started speaking on stages to teach people that we do have a choice. When even in the worst, in the midst of our trauma, we have a choice of the stories that we tell about it, what we make that mean in our life. And the beliefs and the stories that we take directly impact how we experience life. So when we can shift our own inner narrative and guide it to a deliberately positive, empowered version, then we totally transform our lives and our impact on the lives of others.
Because the sky is the limit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I could go on for hours talking with you. We're just touching.
Maybe we'll do a follow-up at some point.
Well, we're just touching the surface here, and I would really love to have you a part of the Whole Care Network. I just think your message is really what the Whole Care Network is all about. It's about the story sharing, because people do connect to stories.
Yes.
And stories break down barriers, and they allow people to move boulders. I just came up with that.
Absolutely.
I just came up with that. Goodness.
It's perfect, and it's fun. Sky and I have a saying that when life gives you boulders, make sure you turn them into waterfalls. Forget about just lemonade, lemons. We're talking bigger and better and waterfalls, and yes,
goodness.
Yes.
Well, before we, I even hate to use the word end the podcast today. Why don't you let our listeners know how they can find your book, your website, all your contact information, so they can learn more about you and Sky?
Well, beautiful. So our book is called The Sky is the Limit. However, that one is spelled SKY.
Why?
The Sky is the Limit, and you can find that on Amazon. And my name is Meridith Alexander. So search under Meridith Alexander, and it's available either in Kindle or in paperback. And if you want to see the current up-to-dates on Sky and her progress, you feel free to follow us on Facebook on Sky is the Limit. That is SCHUY is the limit. And then, of course, if you're interested in connecting with me or in having me speak at an event, if you think that the message would serve, either a group, an association, or even a business, then you can reach me through my website, which is Meridith, again, Meri.
I gotta emphasize the I.
Emphasize the I. Wouldn't be the first time people went wrong. And Alexander.com. So I would love to connect with you and hear your listeners' experiences and insights and stories as well.
And we'll have all of Meridith's contact information up on the Whole Care Network in our new blog that just debuted this past week. So, woohoo! We're going high tech here. But Meridith, within chaos and challenges lie the seeds of the greatest opportunities, and you are certainly someone who's creating healing ties all around us. I can't thank you. I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Oh my gosh, it is always my pleasure, Chris. Anytime, and we'll have to talk more about being part of this network, because what you're doing is truly amazing.
Well, I appreciate that, and to me, I say this very kindly. I'm just a guy with a story, and you're somebody that has a very powerful story, and the Whole Care Network would love to have your story. So,
wow, thank you so much, Chris.
Okay,
thank you.
That does it for this episode of Healing Ties. I'm your host, Chris McClellan, the Bowtie Guy. I'm creating a life to love after caregiving ends through radio, writing, travel, advocacy, and being with awesome people like Meridith Alexander. Healing Ties is a part of the Whole Care Network. Check us out online at thewholecarenetwork.com. We'll see you for another episode of Healing Ties real soon. Bye-bye.